All right, Justin. So I'm going to start with my biggest storyline from this past week of training camp. And honestly, it's been more like the past 24 hours, more likely, because this whole thing with Jonathan Taylor and the Indianapolis Colts has just been unraveling so quickly that it's kind of hard to keep up, because first it's Jonathan Taylor is upset about his contract, and then he's talking about holding out, and then there's the reports that he has back pain and back issues. Then he tweets out that he doesn't have back issues, that their sources are wrong, and then he's not at practice. And then so it's Zach Moss. Then Zach Moss breaks his arm. Now it's all Evan Hull. And it's this whole Indianapolis Colts backfield headlined by Jonathan Taylor's just being upset at the lack of contract, lack of money and investment in him is just so bizarre to me. But I feel like we have to react to it, of course, for Dynasty, because I do think that this has an impact, because we are now talking about Jonathan Taylor, who is coming off of a down season in 2022, now projected maybe for the same amount of volume, but maybe not as many touchdowns, because we're assuming that Anthony Richardson's going to come in. He's going to take goal line work just like Josh Allen, just like Jalen Hurts, and probably not going to dump off a lot. And that's never been Jonathan Taylor's bread and butter, is the receiving game. So
Right.
we're talking about a running back who could be, in a rough situation in 2022 with a rookie mobile quarterback. And now we don't even have any sort of inkling in terms of his long-term future outlook with the Indianapolis Colts or whatever other team it might end up being, that it makes it seem like he's not all that much different than guys like Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, even.
Yeah.
Like, to me, this is really impacting his dynasty value. And I actually posted a tweet saying that he's not a top 5 dynasty running back. Like, I prefer a bunch of the other guys,
Yeah.
the younger, Bijan and Gibbs that are younger, both rookies. Brees Hall, obviously younger as well, too. Then I think when you start including guys like Saquon and Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard, I expect all of them, assuming all three of them play the whole entire season, that they will all outproduce JT. So why not just have them on your dynasty roster instead of Jonathan Taylor? So I don't know. Am I crazy? Am I viewing this a little bit too harshly for Jonathan Taylor's outlook, or do you think that I'm pretty spot on?
I think you're a little more, I don't want to say dramatic, but a little more dramatic than you should be.
Okay.
The thing is, I mean, you named Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is in the exact same situation that Jonathan Taylor is currently in. The difference is Jonathan Taylor is younger than Josh Jacobs. Jonathan Taylor is still actually under contract. If he ends up on the NFI list, he's not getting paid. So I think there are different mechanisms that the Colts have at their disposal to kind of force JT to play this year. I do not expect him to sit out because, again, they're already complaining about the money, rightfully so. All running backs seem like they're underpaid. But he's not also going to then give up a year of, a couple $1 million and not have the potential to earn more. So he knows he has to play this season to accrue a year, to hit free agency, to even get franchise tagged, right, for $10 million. So there's so many things out there that are going to force Jonathan Taylor onto the field. If someone out there is full panic, right, and I'm saying pushing him outside of their top 10 running backs or, something crazy, I'm going to go and probably send some offers for Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to expect him to play this year. And worst case scenario, he plays some of the season. He's still going to be in the NFL moving forward. He's still Jonathan Taylor, right? We can talk about, talent versus situation 1,000 times on this channel. Situation is as bad as it could possibly be right now, but he is still Jonathan Taylor on the other side of that. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to send out a first for Jonathan Taylor, which is probably cheaper than he should be. But if someone bites on that, I'm going to, take the money and run, something, Jonathan Taylor probably wishes he could do right now. So I think that's the way I'm going to approach this.
Yeah, I absolutely am all for buying in on the panic. I am trying to figure out where the line is for him in terms of where do you actually feel comfortable selling him, like for decent value back. And that's where, when I'm talking about guys like Pollard or Jacobs or Barkley, if I can pivot to one of those guys, like I said, I expect them to be more productive in 2023.
Yeah. Definitely.
For fantasy. And so if you're a competing team, you got Jonathan Taylor as your RB1 and you're kind of concerned about this whole entire thing, it might be of benefit to you to move to one of those guys, or maybe go to Brees Hall, go to Christian McCaffrey, drop down and go to Nick Chubb or Austin Eckler. Like those are the moves that I think I would be trying to do if I had Jonathan Taylor. But I do agree with you. If you don't have JT and you see that the manager's panicking right now,
Yeah.
if you can send that 2024 first, a first and a second, a first and Alexander Madison to give them some sort of productive
easily
running back, that is going to be so much better long term for your dynasty roster, because I do agree JT only being 24 years old, he has a future in this league, absolutely. So there is definitely a line there of where it makes sense to sell, but also makes sense to buy.
My number one headline that I have been tracking, I think we have to track out of week one, is what are we going to do with the Chiefs wide receiver group as a whole? Obviously, there's Sky Moore, there is MVS, you have Kadarius Toney, who is now hurt, and really opened the door for another wide receiver to potentially emerge as, a starter on that roster. Because right now, when you look at Kadarius Toney, the typical timeline is 6 weeks to 3 months. If it was anybody other than Kadarius Toney, I'd probably expect 6 weeks. But since it is Kadarius Toney, the likelihood that this bleeds, 8 weeks, 9, 10 weeks is very realistic. And if he lands on IR to start the season, he is out for at least 4 games. That means one of, Richie James, Justin Ross, Justin Watson is going to be thrust into that starting lineup. They're going to play in 3 wide receiver sets. I mean, I get that they're not exciting names, I think, outside of Justin Ross, which people are getting very, very hyped on because he was great prior to injury at Clemson. What are you doing? Is there anybody there that you're going to say, this is a future star? This is somebody I have to go out and acquire on the cheap now because they're playing with Mahomes and it's only a matter of time before they break out. Is it Justin Ross? Probably the most likely candidate. Or does Richie James continue success from 2022? I think that's the question that all of us are trying to ask ourselves right now.
Right. And I mean, you can even throw Rashee Rice into there too, the second round rookie that they drafted. But he feels more like a project, because he was very raw. He didn't have the Power 5 experience really that a bunch of other wide receivers had coming out into the draft this year. And he is just a very raw prospect. And so he does need work. And I've seen the reports that are saying that he looks really, really good whenever he's playing with the ones. And you've seen the clips maybe of Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball and he makes contested catches. And then you see other reports that are saying he's primarily running with the twos.
Yeah.
So there is, conflicting reports or conflicting usage, I should say, for Rashee Rice. But of the 3 guys, I think that are most interesting to dynasty managers who could potentially be on your waiver wire right now, Ross, Watson, and Richie James, I'm kind of throwing out Justin Watson. I don't know if we should just be so eager to just kind of throw him under the rug.
You should.
But I think we're all just pushing Watson away and really just focusing on Ross and Richie James. And I highlighted Richie James in a video that just went out last week, saying that he did really, really well in the situation that he had last year with the New York Giants, where it was basically just him and Isaiah Hodgins because Wandale was hurt, Darius Slayton was hurt. They didn't really have anybody else at that point. No Jalen Hyatt, no Paris Campbell, no Darren Waller. It was just those 2 receivers. And James had solid production as a PPR kind of guy. And so I think that he has that potential if he were to find himself in a similar situation, which things could appear to be trending in that direction. Justin Ross, though, to me, he seems like the guy, and I feel like that's what everybody else sees with Justin Ross. Like he was an electric athlete in college, and really it was just the injury that derailed him. And that was kind of it. But if he's healthy, paired with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he's the guy who can really become like if you're the guy who held on to Josh Gordon for like 5 years, like Justin Ross is probably the guy that you want to go out and grab because he has Josh Gordon level upside at waiver wire-ish level prices, the last player stashed on your bench. And that is what Justin Ross represents. And so I'm interested in both of them, in both Ross and James, but one of them clearly has much more upside than the other.
Yeah, and the window to add Justin Ross has closed. He's up to 86%, rostership over on Sleeper. Months ago, if he was sitting out there, that was the time to add him. And people are going to ask, right? Do you now just capitalize on Justin Ross gaining value? That's typically what we're going to tell you, right? Like if I can get a second for Justin Ross, I
Oh,
don't think you
done.
can. I don't think you can. But if somebody in your league is just like Justin Ross, he's going to return to form. Because I mean, at one point he was the wide receiver one, in his class as like a sophomore. Like people were like, he's the next dude. He's the next Clemson wide receiver. If someone is still buying into that, like fully buying in, and you can get a second, I'm going to take that. But I mean, I'm not going to take a third. You know what I mean? I'm not going to take a fourth. So I'd rather just hold because, again, there is a piece of me that likes to think, what if? Like, what if he is healthy and he just becomes Justin Ross again? Like, we were watching him in college and thinking, here we go again. Like, this is it. Like, it's Hopkins. It is Mike Williams. It's everybody else coming out of that school. And Justin Ross is just the next guy in line. So I like to be hopeful. I think it's Justin Ross. If there's going to be anybody, it's the unknown, right? Throw Rashee Rice out because you have no chance of really getting him anywhere right now.
Right.
He was a first-round rookie pick for some people, very back end of the first. So if you're going to look at the unknowns, Justin Ross is the guy, I think. Before we get to our next headline, if you guys want 2 additional training camp story headlines that we're tracking this week, go ahead and check out the DLF YouTube memberships. We have a ton of member videos already there, and we are adding more and more every single week. So check that out, guys. You get extra content from myself and Addison year round.
All right, so my second storyline that I've been following, again, another recent one as well, is we haven't had actual confirmation yet that this is going to happen, but it just feels like it's all but signed on paper that Dalvin Cook is heading to the New York Jets, that he is going to come in, and I don't know if he's going to act as a bridge running back while Breece Hall gets a couple more weeks to get healthy, or if they're going to be a 1-2 punch, powerful tandem with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know what the whole entire situation is going to look like, but I guess that's what we're going to be here to talk about. So, Justin, I'm hoping that you can honestly help me out with this one because I really am struggling with how to value Dalvin Cook, assuming that it does seem like he's going to sign with the New York Jets, and then B, obviously I'm not selling Breece Hall in Dynasty because of this news, because it's Dynasty. He's 22. He's a fantastic player, fantastic running back, and you can build more for the future. But should we be concerned about the immediate production that you're going to get from Breece Hall, in September and October, and maybe there's some other options that we could be looking at the running back position to kind of fill that gap?
So I think even if Dalvin Cook doesn't sign in New York, you need to be worried about Breece Hall's short-term production, September, October. Anyways, he's not back at practice yet. Running backs after ACL tears typically start slow. Those guys will have down seasons. I mean, you can look at Dalvin Cook's season coming off of the ACL tear. You can look at Saquon Barkley. And I think those two are probably the most relevant because of the caliber of player we know Breece Hall is. He's in that exact same conversation as those guys were at that age. So even if Dalvin Cook is there, Breece Hall is going to start slow. That's almost a guarantee. I don't think Dalvin Cook coming in really affects that too much. If anything, it maybe makes me more confident in Breece Hall later in the season because they're not going to lean on him early when he's not, truly 100% yet. And that probably opens the door for Dalvin Cook to be a top 24 running back in New York early on. But as Breece gets stronger, as Breece gets healthier, Dalvin Cook is going to get less and less work because Breece Hall is better than him at this point in their careers. It really is. So if you can use that, again, I'm going to say it like Jonathan Taylor, if you can use that as a window to buy low, even if it's a minor discount, right? Instead of giving up 2 firsts and a player, I'm giving up 2 firsts, then yeah, I'm going to take that window and I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger still. Like long-term, Breece Hall is going to be an absolute stud. He's the RB2. He, for some people is probably still the RB1. He shouldn't be over Bijan, but he might be. So I'm not going to move it off of a running back a lot of people were calling washed up, 3 months ago. I'm not going to move off of that because Dalvin Cook's now in New York. So I think that's the way to approach it is Dalvin's going to be solid. Breece is going to be the guy by the end of the year.
I think that's the best way to look at it because, I mean, speaking from the Breece Hall standpoint, we saw through 7 weeks of the season last year, he wasn't really getting workhorse touches and workhorse volume. to start as a rookie. Like he was still splitting snaps with Michael Carter. So, he's already showcased that he can be very productive on limited volume. And then his, role will grow more as he further continues to separate himself from the competition in the committee in his backfield. So I agree with you. I think that that's what's going to end up happening for Hall specifically. Now, Dalvin Cook might actually be interesting, I think, early on. Like
Yep.
he might be a guy that, if you're contending and you have your 2024 second, it's going to be late. If you can toss that over and just go get Dalvin Cook, and instead of sending it for Samaje Perine or Brian Robinson or, any of those kind of guys that you're just hoping are going to give you a filler couple starter weeks, especially at the beginning of the season, then I think that going out and spending that second for Dalvin Cook is going to be a lot better because you do have, the production profile of Cook that even though he is washed in this Jets offense with Aaron Rodgers, I think that he can be pretty good early on. And then you'll just have to figure out stuff later on as Breece Hall continues to take work.
My second headline, it's probably a little less consequential for Dynasty because of the outcome, but it's still worth mentioning, talking about, because it was all the rage on Twitter early when training camp started. Joe Burrow goes down with a non-contact injury. You see him limping, can't put any pressure on it. All of us immediately think, oh God, Achilles tear, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, all their value's gone. Obviously, that is not the case. He comes away with a calf strain. He's going to miss several weeks. Should be available week 1, but it's not a guarantee at this point. So basically, it should be a non-story by the start of the season. But we all know this time of year, people get skittish. So I'm assuming you're going to use this opportunity as a chance to buy low on anybody in that offense. If any manager thinks, what if this lingers and affects anybody on that roster's, fantasy value?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think any smart dynasty manager out there has looked at this and said, man, this might suck, for riding out the waves of the preseason and maybe even honestly in a week 1 or week 2, but it's Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I think Joe Mixon will still be fine because you're probably not expecting all that much if you have Joe Mixon anyway. Like you're just hoping that he gets the volume at this point, which
Yep.
I don't think that that's going to change with or without Joe Burrow, really. But if you have the other three, you're you're not doing anything, I think, or at least you shouldn't be doing anything. So if you have Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and you're not panic selling, but you're worried and you're throwing out some offers and stuff and see what's going on, if you can get better options, unless it's actually a trade that you would have done if Joe Burrow was completely healthy, there's really no reason for you to actually be looking at stuff. Like if you wanted to move Burrow and you wanted to go over to Justin Herbert, that's fine. You could do that anyway because you probably would have done that if Joe Burrow wasn't hurt, or if you had Jamar Chase, you're trying to get to Justin Jefferson, or you're trying to get CeeDee Lamb and this really fun other player that could be, a high upside player for you. That's fine. You're probably going to do that already without Joe Burrow being hurt.
Yeah.
If it's not one of those kind of deals, just don't even waste your energy on that.
That's the thing. Look, I don't think you're going to be able to necessarily buy low, but I do think people are going to be more willing to listen to offers on everybody on that offense because it's the preseason. We're starved for news, and immediately we get a little tiny baby red flag that's like, hey, not everything's perfect anymore. So that immediately gets into people's heads, and people, again, they won't panic sell, but where T. Higgins or Jamar Chase may have been off limits before, there's a tiny window where you can probably get fair value or give up fair value and actually get someone to accept an offer. So that's the kind of thing you need to play. It's like the tiny mental game within fantasy is, I'm not going to try to fleece you. I'm not going to try to take you for a ride here, but I know you're maybe a little bit more willing to trade than you would have been, 72 hours ago or whenever that news broke.
All right, Justin, I've saved this as my final headline because this really hits home for both of us because all off season long, through countless videos, live streams, tweets, we've been talking about how much J.K. Dobbins has been an amazing value this entire offseason, that you just need to go out and buy him because he's back because of what he did at the end of the season last year. And we've been going all offseason under this, pushing this narrative basically to everybody out there. And now, for some godforsaken reason, he is put on the PUP list because of his continual rehab from his knee injury, from the cleanup surgery that he had mid-season last year. And so he's not practicing. John Harbaugh says that it's not a very simple answer. There's really no idea of what's going on right now. And on top of all of that, this could be like a contract thing because he was having issues about not getting re-signed. But what kind of leverage does a running back who really hasn't done anything since his rookie year in 2020, what kind of leverage does he have to try to negotiate for more money for a second contract? This whole entire thing is so wild, and it's really making me just kind of step back and say, do I even want J.K. Dobbins heading into the 2023 season? Do you want J.K. still? Like, what are you doing with all the shares that you've bought and all the shares that we've been telling people to buy?
I have bought so much J.K. Dobbins. What I don't understand is how do you finish the season fully healthy, played multiple games after your second surgery, looked incredible doing it, like truly looked incredible. And then we get to July, not a peep about injury before that. We get to July, and all of a sudden, the man is physically unable to perform. I don't understand what is going on, and I'm furious. But the truth is, so I think this is contract based. I am basing that off of nothing other than this is super weird, and he is disputing his contract or wants an extension, just like Jonathan Taylor does, which Jonathan Taylor is more deserving, but that's not the point. He wants a new contract as well. And then all of a sudden, a guy that was seemingly fully healthy pops up on the PUP list. John Harbaugh can't talk about how weird it is that he's on the PUP list and they can't explain it. It just feels like a contract. With that being said, I don't think you can sell J.K. Dobbins if you roster him. Because what are you going to get? Who wants to go out and buy J.K. Dobbins? Not even for a fair price, for, slightly below market. You're not even going to get that. You're only going to get lowball offers. The only reason I know that is because I've been getting lowball offers for a month now, and it's infuriating. So it's just, you don't really have a path out. I'm probably not going to try to buy low either. Like, I am in a firm hold situation because something has to shake out one way or the other. So I think I'm fine being left holding the bag, but I'm not going to trade for cheap and then get left holding the bag. So it's a weird situation to be in, and it's infuriating from a dynasty, a redraft, a best ball standpoint. It's not fun.
You have J.K. Dobbins right now. I'm going to toss out some potential trade offers that maybe you're not receiving right now, but should you receive them in your inbox, would you consider these or not?
All right.
DeAndre Swift, straight up for J.K. Dobbins.
Yes, I take Swift.
Zach Charbonnet and a 2025 second.
That's a roster specific trade. I think if I'm not contending, like I'm not close to contending, I'll take Sharbs. I'll tear down and I'll pick up the pick. I think that makes a lot of sense if you're not a legitimate contender.
All right. So I think I know your answer based on that answer then for Alexander Madison in a 25 second.
The thing is, like, it's different. I think Madison has a chance to be a top 15 running back this year. I don't think he is. I think he's top 20. But he has a path to very similar production as J.K. Dobbins. And if I can get a second on top, eliminate the headache, Dobbins is hitting free agency next year anyways, I'm probably going to take that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one where, Charbonnet, if your team is leaning towards rebuilding, that trade makes sense. But Madison, if you bought Dobbins as your RB2 because you're trying to compete,
yep,
Madison might be a good pivot for you if you are contending.
Agreed.
So then the last couple of ones, we're just going to continue with those. Kendre Miller in a second, James Cook in a second, David Montgomery in a second.
No, I'm not taking any of those. I think I'm keeping Dobbins over all of those. I like Kendre Miller. I do like him, but he has a very muddled path forward. He also has third-round draft capital, which is good, but it's significantly less enticing than second-round draft capital with Sharbs, so I'll pass there. I like David Montgomery. I like second-round picks, but I don't think it's enough to get J.K. Dobbins. Demo has a chance to be top 24, maybe top 20. And we just talked about that in the boring players video, if you want to title it that. But I'm not going to pull that trigger. I don't think that's worth it.
Okay, so I think that was a good kind of barometer for how you're valuing J.K. Dobbins right now. And I'm in agreement with all those all the answers that you gave for each one of those
Pass the
hypothetical
test.
trades.
Love it.
So, yeah, I just think that this Dobbins situation, the teams that I have him on right now, I'm with you. I'm just in a firm hold, and I am praying every single day that this just turns in the right direction.
Let's close it out. My final headline is Javonte Williams avoids the pup and is actually fully healthy to start the season. Now, I think this comes as a enormous shock to most people. Everything we have seen from reports, everything we've seen from Twitter, all of it just said there's no chance he is ready to start the season. It is going to be an absolute long shot for him to avoid the pup. Okay, well, it's training camp. He avoided the pup. And that means, Samaje Perine, he is in trouble. That means Javonte Williams is probably going to spike in ADP, not only in Dynasty, but in redraft, in best ball, everything, because we expect him to play early on. So with that being said, Addison, how are you treating him in Dynasty, right? Did you buy the dip? Are you still buying, or are you looking to sell?
Any shares that I had of Javonte, I had already moved last year when he got hurt, basically, because I was in the camp of saying that you should just sell Javonte for a first, whatever first you can get. At that time, it was still 2023. I was even selling for 2024. And so I don't have any Javonte right now. And I haven't tried to buy any Javonte since, because I've been under the impression, just like everybody else, that this was J.K. Dobbins 2.0, right? That we were going to have, he just wrecked his knee, his ACL, his LCL, the whole alphabet of CLs are all just destroyed in his knee, right? And his meniscus, all of it. It's just, he doesn't even have a knee anymore.
Bag of
That's what we were
bones.
told. And that's essentially what happened with J.K. Dobbins. And we saw, how that basically played out with Dobbins' career. He had to have cleanup surgery mid-season, and it was just, it wasn't really good year one after the injury. Now, this does absolutely change some things, because this is not where we were with J.K. Dobbins last year. Like last year, we were still hearing things in the summer of like, well, J.K. might not be ready to even start the season. Like, he's actually not ahead of schedule, which every player is ahead of schedule on their injury recovery. J.K. Dobbins was not ahead of schedule. I've seen things of from physical therapists and fantasy doctors and stuff, like they're comparing Javonte's like range of motion in his knee versus Dobbins and all that stuff. And Javonte was ahead of Dobbins at this point last year too. So it does really feel like he has the potential to play early on and play the majority of the season. Now, how effective he's going to be early on, we just talked about it with Breece Hall a little bit. We talked about it a little bit with J.K. Dobbins. Is that the early on production may not necessarily be there, especially if they're trying to ease him in, and they do have Samaje Perine. But this certainly does bode well for second half Javonte Williams. And he could be an interesting buy right now, but it does feel like, since that news came out, that his price has probably jumped up probably about 50% or more.
We've got some trades that have actually taken place since the news broke. But tell me if you're in, if you're out at either of these costs.
Okay.
So, number one, Javonte Williams for Malik Davis, a 2024 second and a 2024 fourth.
I'm buying Javonte for that price.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know who did that deal, but if you somehow watch this channel, reverse it. Undo that deal.
I'll take Javonte over a second and some dart throws all day.
Yep, I'm completely with you. Javonte Williams for Tank Bigsby, Kendre Miller, Evan Ingram.
That feels pretty similar to, the Kendre Miller in a second for J.K. Dobbins, because that kind of feels like how Tank and Evan Ingram kind of are together, to where I would take the upside of Javonte Williams still over Kendre and the other, Tank and Evan Ingram. But I do feel like that's definitely a better price to sell for than just a 2024 second. But I'll still take Javonte.
Absolutely. Javonte Williams or Rachaad White and 2 second-round picks. 2024 seconds.
Okay, so we're playing on the heartstrings a little bit of my Rachaad White love.
I know.
That one feels like one where if you're competing, I think that I would take Rachaad White, because I do expect Rachaad White to have a better 2023 season than Javonte. And then there's still the potential of, that White's entering year 2. He could play out his rookie contract as the starter for the Buccaneers while they're going through this rebuild phase, and then they invest in a running back kind of more when they're actually ready to invest. So you might have the same kind of future with Rachaad White as you would Javonte, better production in 2023, and then you get 2 seconds on top of that. So I would take Rachaad White in 2 seconds there over Javonte. I think that's a good way to move away from him, and not a trade that I would be trying to do if I was trying to buy Javonte.
Got it. And to close it out, would you give up a 2024 first or any first for Javonte Williams now?
Nope. I'm sticking true to what I was saying last year. I'm keeping my first round picks over these kind of running backs. I would keep a first over J.K. Dobbins. And it's not necessarily, a knock against Javonte that I'm keeping it first. It's just there's so much more flexibility. Javonte could get hurt again or, have a setback, and that first doesn't get injured. It doesn't, get any older. There's no risk involved with the first. It just gives you more flexibility, and is, I think, a better asset to have heading into 2024 and potentially onward as you draft that rookie or trade it for something potentially better down the road. So I'm keeping my flexibility with a first.